The plasma hit atmosphere and turned white. Vorath watched the thermal flux valve blow wide, watched the underloft fill with killing light, watched every protocol he'd ever memorized become useless in the span of a breath, and then watched Chief Engineer Marin walk past him like he wasn't there. She lifted something from the scrap metal altar, a wrench. She raised it once, brought it down with a single unhurried tap, and 3 weeks earlier, the Dawnspire's water filtration membrane on Deck 9 had clogged for the second time in a standard cycle. Vorath hadn't cared about the membrane. He'd cared about the inspection. Fleet Command required a full walkthrough every quarter rotation, bow to keel, and he intended to complete it in under 4 hours because he had a reputation and because, truth is, the underloft made him uncomfortable. Engineering decks on conquered vessels were supposed to be sterile, functional, quiet in the way machines are quiet when they're behaving. Marin's underloft was none of these things. He heard it before he saw it, a low, off-rhythm clanging, almost musical, echoing up through the deck plating. When the lift doors opened, the air hit different, warmer, denser, smelling of solder and something almost biological, like the oils on living skin. 2 Veli artificers passed him without saluting. One of them pressed a palm flat against a coolant pipe as she walked by and muttered something he couldn't catch. He found the altar in an alcove behind the secondary coupling array. Someone, Marin, obviously, had welded it together from hull scrap and spent rivets, a rough, knee-high structure shaped like an open hand. Tools hung from its fingers on wire loops, and across the base, etched in letters too deliberate to be casual, a single line, "Between them and the void, we stand." "Commander!" Marin's voice came from underneath a plasma conduit. She rolled out on a crawler, hydro spanner in one hand, grease to her elbows. She didn't stand. "You're on my deck." "Your deck," Vorath repeated. "You rule up on the helm deck, but I rain down here." She said it the way someone states atmospheric pressure, not a challenge, a measurement. She gestured at the alcove with the spanner. "Don't touch the wrench." He looked. Resting at the center of the altar's open palm sat a standard-issue torque wrench. Unremarkable in every measurable way, someone had wrapped its grip in copper wire and polished the head until it caught light. "That," Vorath said carefully, "is a tool." "That," Marin said, "is the blessed wrench. And she stays where she is unless things go truly sideways." He filed a report. The report went nowhere. And over the following days, the situation compounded in ways that made filing additional reports feel increasingly absurd. Performance metrics climbed, not incrementally, dramatically. Thermal efficiency up 11%. Response times on repair calls cut nearly in half. The Veli, the Draith, even the Solinari apprentice who'd barely spoken since boarding, all of them had started doing it, touching bulkheads, talking to conduits. A Draith machinist named Tulloch began greeting the main drive by name every morning. The ship, across all engineering logs, was no longer it. The Dawnspire was she, and the wrench sat on its altar, waiting. Vorath told himself it was coincidence. He told himself human superstition was a known variable, catalogued and dismissed by xenopsychologists across the Concord. He told himself the engineering numbers would normalize. They didn't. They kept climbing, and his crew kept praying, if that's what it was, to a religion made of solder and a single polished wrench. Then the thermal flux valve blew. The plasma turned the air to glass. Every alarm on the underloft fired at once. A shrieking chorus that Vorath's training said meant evacuate, seal, vent the deck, save the ship. Standard procedure, drilled into every Concord officer since Academy. He reached for the emergency comm on his wrist. Marin was already walking, not running, walking, past the screaming Veli artificers who'd flattened against the walls, past Tulloch, who had both hands pressed to the deck plating like he was holding the ship's hand. Past the alarms, past the heat, past every rational response the situation demanded, she stopped at the altar. She looked at the wrench, the way a surgeon looks at a scalpel. No reverence yet, just selection, just certainty. She lifted it from the open palm. Vorath opened his mouth to order evacuation, to countermand whatever insanity was about to happen, to do something that would make sense in the report he'd have to file if they survived. Marin reached the ruptured valve. Plasma licked the air 2 meters from her face, white and screaming. She didn't flinch. She didn't brace. She adjusted her grip, shifted her weight like a batter-finding stance, and brought the blessed wrench down once. One tap. Not hard, not desperate, casual. The kind of tap you'd give a friend's shoulder to get their attention. The valve caught, shuddered, seated itself with a hiss and a click that had no business sounding so clean. Plasma flow normalized. The temperature readings on Vorath's wrist display dropped 12 degrees in 4 seconds. The alarms died one by one, leaving a silence so total he could hear the copper wire on the wrench grip creak as Marin shifted it in her hand. She walked back to the altar. She placed the wrench in the center of the open palm, gently, the way you set down something sleeping. Then she looked at Vorath, didn't smile, didn't gloat, just looked at him with the quiet, grease-streaked patience of someone who'd been right about something she'd never bothered to argue. Vorath closed his mouth, closed the comm channel, and said nothing, because nothing was the only honest response. He never filed the report. He never questioned the altar. And when Fleet Command sent a cultural audit request 4 rotations later, he marked the underloft's practices as long-standing operational tradition and sent it back without a second thought. It turned out he wasn't alone. Across the Concord, on frigates and mining haulers and deep-range scouts, the same thing was happening. Wherever human engineers served, altars appeared. Wrenches got blessed. Ships got named and spoken to and touched like living things. A Veli carrier commander reported that her entire engineering staff had started singing to the reactor during cold starts. A Dreth battle group logged a formal theological inquiry about whether machines could have souls, so because their human chief kept insisting their flagship was sad after a refit. Species after species, ship after ship, not because anyone ordered it, not because it made sense, because it worked. Because belief, it turned out, didn't need to be rational to be real. It just needed to be shared. She fixed a plasma rupture with one tap, and a wrench she treats like a holy relic. That was how the story spread, and it kept spreading through docking bays and officer exchanges and late-watch conversations between species who had nothing else in common except the hum of a ship beneath their feet. The first religion to survive the void, and it was born in an engine room. Vorath walked the underloft alone at third watch. Months later, when the deck was empty and the only sound was the dawn spire breathing through her vents, he stopped at the altar. The wrench sat in the scrap metal palm, copper wire dull now, head still polished. He didn't touch it, but he stood there longer than he needed to, listening to the ship hum around him, and for a moment, just a moment, he understood why they called her alive. The wrench caught the low light and held it,